Only in America.
Only in America.
Only in America.
Only in America.
Only America.
Only in America.
This time, the importance of a sidewalk and how shoe leather politics can strengthen diverse communities.
Just putting a sidewalk, being able to be there when a family sees a sidewalk in their neighborhood that they had never had before, they never believed were going to get, because they felt nobody ever listened to them.
My conversation with San Antonio Councilwoman Rebecca Viagran, who tells me that she worries the partisan attitudes in Washington could seep into local politics.
Showmanship and gamesmanship, I think it's seeping down at a local level, and I don't want to see partisans, at least in my city, in San Antonio. And I think that's important because we have too much work to do to dwell on one vote or another, and let's just keep going. You have to keep talking to each other because we need each other. I think at the federal level, we need each other too.
And later, a lawyer discovers how the Trump administration lost track of hundreds of children separated from their parents at the southern border.
I think in a perfect world, ICE would reunify all of the parents with their children, but we knew that the government was not doing it, so we started putting those pieces of the puzzle together ourselves.
From the National Immigration Forum, I'm Ali Noorani with Only in America. I've known Rebecca Viagran for several years now, and I remember pretty clearly the excitement that I felt when I first heard she was running for office. Rebecca was born and raised on the south side of San Antonio, Texas, to a family with deep roots in the community and a long history of serving others. On her father's side, Rebecca traces her heritage all the way back to the Alamo. And for her mother's side, the journey began in Italy and went through Mexico all the way to Texas. Councilwoman Viagran graduated from Texas State University and earned a master's degree from St. Mary's University. And in 2013, she won the election to represent San Antonio City Council's District Number 3. Since then, her district has seen unprecedented economic and community growth. We chatted the other week in Austin during the Texas Tribune Festival, where she began by telling me about her own heritage and how her Catholic upbringing taught her about social justice.
What was it like for you growing up in San Antonio?
It was wonderful. I had a lot of cousins. I lived right down the street from my school, so I walked to school every day. My dad was the oldest of 11 kids, so we were always at my grandmother's house. Grandma's house was down the street from where my dad lives, and I just live 2 houses away from where my mom lives right now, so we don't go far away from the neighborhood. But it was great, and and I lived. And I think I grew up not knowing that, we were middle class. We were middle and working class. I didn't know that when I was younger. I was just going to school. Both parents worked. Grandmother stayed home. Grandfather worked. We just made it all happen. Mom and Dad always were politically active, and Grandpa was too. But I never knew they were politically active. I just thought we were gathering around with friends and talking about what needs to happen in the south side of San Antonio. Later on in life, found out, oh yeah, this person is a state senator or state representative. That means something.
Was the family, in essence, politically organizing and saying, okay, this is the person that we're going to support?
I think so, because it was also friends and mom and dad, because we were part of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church was very organized. COPS Metro was very organized in the South Side and in all of the Catholic churches. And it was also, I went to Catholic school growing up, and the nuns and the teachers taught us about Catholic social justice and social justice teaching. And it was just something that even at an early age, it was ingrained in the faith tradition. We had some really radical nuns and priests, but I didn't realize that they were teaching me. It's just you got to do for others. You got to help out these people. You got to make sure that those people who can't speak for themselves, that you speak up for them. So that was one of the things that we were brought up on. And they would organize and get their friends to go vote. They always took my sister and I to go vote with them. They organized and they would go, support one candidate or another. And even before my dad passed away more than 10 years ago, I think when Henry Cuellar was first running, I think, for Congress, we had these big Christmas parties at my dad's house. And one of the people brought him to my dad's, or my parents' Christmas party so he could meet my dad, so he could walk around and meet the people in the area. And so it was then when I'm like, okay, so people are coming to my dad because they're saying, you need to meet this man of influence. And it was then, I think, more than 10 years ago, that it clicked, thought, okay, all right.
And was there one experience where you realized that what the nuns in the priesthood taught you around social justice, that it clicked for you?
It was later in high school because I went to an all-girls Catholic high school too. It was in my senior year in high school, I will say, that it really started clicking that, wait a minute, we need to go out, we need to help others and just helping others. And I think that's when it really came alive and I took ownership of it is when I went to college. And it was in the university because it was my first time into a public university. And that's when I realized, wait, everybody doesn't look like me. They don't believe like me. It was definitely an identity and a culture clash for me. And even though it was just 45 minutes up the road in San Marcos. And so I had to figure out, okay, what do I believe? I mean, this is what my mom and my dad and the teachers taught me, but what is it that I believe? And when I came down to it, the social justice teaching is what I believed. Volunteered, went just leadership development, volunteered during Hurricane Katrina, went to New Orleans, did urban ministry in New York City, just all of these different things. And it was really just came down to it. I'm like, oh, that's what those VEST teachers were doing, the volunteer education teachers. They would come from Illinois or different parts of the United States. And it was almost like AmeriCorps or Teach for America. They would come into my little school and they did it because they wanted to give back to a poorer community. And that's when I realized, oh, I guess I'm a poorer community. And I didn't realize that. But yeah, I think it was really in college, my first year in college, when I had to stand up to know what I believed. And it wasn't my mom's, and it wasn't my dad's, and it wasn't my church's. It was what I believed. That's what made it real.
So you come back, graduate from college. What was your career like before you decided to run for office?
It was kind of all over the place a little bit. I got my Bachelor's of Science in Geography and Urban Planning, and then I went to work. I got back to San Antonio, and I worked in child development. No sense, but I needed a job, and I had to make money, and so that's what I did for a couple of years, maybe a little over a year, and then I got a job to be a council aide with one of the council members. And again, somebody mentioned to my dad, hey, this council member is needing some staff people. Do you think Rebecca would be interested? So I went and I was a council aide for one person, and then I left, or then that contract was over, and then somebody else picked me up. And so I was with them for about 3 years as a council aide. And that's another thing that happened to me is I live on the south side of San Antonio, which the AMI is $38,000. But I worked for a district on a more affluent part of the city. So I would see the disparities every day. And I just thought, what's going on here? So I did that. I came back to city council. I was an aide, and then I was tired of it. After 3 years, it was so political. It was so tiring. So I decided I was going to move out of the country, and I left. And I moved to Spain. I lived in Spain, did some work, and did some ministry there with some college students. But I felt comfortable going to Spain because I live not far from the missions in San Antonio. So I could feel some sort of connection, or it was kind of familiar to me, not knowing that it was better for me in Spain because I looked the way I did with my dark hair and my brown skin in some aspects because I didn't think I was American, so that was okay. I wasn't called certain names. But then I went just on a brief tour weekend. We went to Morocco. We were rushing to get back onto the ferry. So I'm rushing to get back onto the ferry, and I'm outrunning everyone, and the Spanish security guards were stopping me. They're like, no, you can't go. And I'm like, wait. And so I pulled out my American passport, And then when they saw all the other Americans with me who looked different than I did, then they let me on. So it was then, and also when I was in Morocco, I thought, gosh, I look really Moroccan with the dark hair and the dark eyes. I think that was a really interesting experience for me. But after living in Spain, came back to San Antonio, worked at St. Mary's University, again in the ministry office. Was doing some secretarial work, admin work, and then some leadership development too. But then again, Catholic social teaching just continued to stay the vein throughout all of my life and even in my professional career. And then after that, after St. Mary's, then I got my master's degree, taught a class for St. Mary's. Then I started working at the San Antonio Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and at MAT, Mexicans and Americans Thinking Together, when we worked on different programs. So even at St. Mary's, we were still talking about immigration reform and integration and marching and walk for justice, organize these things. And I resigned from MAT, and my father passed away, and there was an opening on the city council because somebody had resigned.
Your father passed away, an opening on the city council. What did these two things mean at that moment?
Yeah, it was really a poignant moment for me because my father passed away, and at the end of that same month my father passed away, there was an opening on the city council. And I just thought, and it was a resignation, and they had to go through an appointment process. So I said, you know what? I should do it. I mean, because everyone always asked my dad to run for council, and he never wanted to do it. So I thought, well, maybe I'm supposed to run for council. So I put my name in the hat. I didn't get the appointment. And I thought, well, I'll work with the appointee. And they never worked with me. So I decided, I am from here. I'm educated. I have the work experience. I'm qualified. I'm going to run. And I ended up running. And a lot of the people that live in my area all still remember my dad. They know his name, and they know my last name now too. And a lot of those connections still happen. That is the most beautiful thing about this. And it was like Dad was pushing me and nudging me to do it. But as soon as I decided to run, it's almost like everything flooded back to remembering how he talked to people, how he worked with people, how people came and talked to him, and what he did, and how he organized, and how he worked with the church. And all of these things that I saw him do, I am now able to walk out and live out because of his work that he did. And building relationships, and that's what it's about, building relationships and delivering on those requests people make for you. So yeah, every now and then you get what we call like little winks from heaven. And so that's what, we do.
So is there a moment where whether it was working with a constituent or working with a fellow council member, where you kind of said, okay, this is worth it?
Oh, yeah, every day. I say it's worth it, because once you say otherwise, you shouldn't be in the work anymore. Yeah, there are lots of moments when just putting a sidewalk into being able to be there when a family sees a sidewalk in their neighborhood that they had never had before, number one, and number two, that they never believed they were ever going to get, because they felt nobody ever listened to them. To be able to deliver on that is, makes it all worth it. Every day. And one of my favorite stories is once we finished doing the sidewalk, and it was a ribbon cutting for a sidewalk or drainage project on the street. But this grandmother came out, she had her grandson, and she said to me, she's like, I feel like a rich person because I have this sidewalk. And then she tells me, and I'm getting tired now because my grandson wants to do nothing but walk up and down the sidewalk in front of our house now. And I thought, and there it is. Now she's going to be able to safely walk with her grandson up and down the street safely, where maybe she was just sedentary inside the house. But now she's able to walk and see her neighbors, and then they're going to know who their neighbors are, and then they can start saying, what else do we need to do? And then there's an organizing, there's a health aspect to it. It's just a sidewalk can change a whole perspective of how somebody feels about themselves and about their community. That's why I love doing what I do, and seeing my residents come out and speak at city council meetings, come out more to neighborhood meetings, because they now feel like somebody is listening, and when they're using their voice. And I love that. Even that part I absolutely love, besides delivering on all of these things that we've needed for so long. And I always use sidewalks because I remember when I was a little kid, that's what Cops Metro and my parents, they would always talk about how bad the streets are and the sidewalks. So I'm always especially happy when I can deliver sidewalks and streets to the community.
Yeah, and the other thing is that it goes back to your urban planning degree, right? Because if a neighborhood has a sidewalk, it's actually a neighborhood. People can walk.
Yes, people can go walk. They can check on their other neighbors. They can see what's going on. And if they walk down the street, they see their neighbor, you stop, you talk about what's happening. And it builds that community.
All right, so I'm going to take a big risk here, and I'm going to stretch a metaphor probably further than it needs to be stretched. So nationally, the politics are pretty ugly. And we were talking about this as we were walking over. And how has the national political environment influenced your district? And the stretched metaphor, I guess, is, do you think that at the national level we have to kind of return to the idea of just building sidewalks for each other?
I think, yes, we have to, go back to just building sidewalks for one another, deliver on services, basic services. The items that are happening at the federal level seeping into local politics and local things, because what's happening now, and I think also the rhetoric that's happening, what's happening now is people are just saying, just outright, blatantly saying something that is not true, and nobody is calling them out on it being not true. And you have to do that. You have to call people out when they're not saying something that's true. For example, if somebody says, oh yeah, this is happening because this person was stealing from all of this. That's what I heard. They always say that. That's what I heard. So it's somebody else who said it. And so other people take it in as truth. But that's not true. And so what we've had to do is call people out. I don't know, just bring up the truth and say, no, this is what happened. And this is the information. And this is the data that we have.
So it's almost like trust is really hard to sustain at a local level when things are happening, when things are so complicated at a national level?
Well, yes, that's exactly right. So I think as you're also a politician, a public service servant, there's already a level of distrust or skepticism, I would say. So you have to work, 10 times hard, I think, in order to build that relationship and that trust. You have to deliver. You have to deliver to the community. And so it really is. And just showmanship and gamesmanship, that's really happening too. I think it's seeping down at a local level. And I don't want to see partisans, at least in my city, in San Antonio. It's a nonpartisan municipal government. And I think that's important because we have too much work to do to dwell on one vote or another, and let's just keep going. You have to keep talking to each other because we need each other. And I think at the federal level, we need each other too. But that's a whole other story right now.
So my last question for you. The name of the podcast is Only in America. So if you could finish this sentence, Only in America, ...
Oh, wow, that's a tough one. Only in America can a daughter of indigenous family who was a defender at the Alamo get elected to also decide what the new plan of the Alamo is going to be. I think that's something really special and only in America.
All right, you win. That's the best answer I've ever gotten to that question. Remember the Alamo.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rebecca Viagran represents District 3 on the south side of San Antonio, Texas, where she grew up. And there's more about Rebecca at our website, immigrationforum.org.
Support for the National Immigration Forum comes from the James Irvine Foundation, Expanding Opportunity for the People of California, and from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, established in 1911 by Andrew Carnegie to promote the advancement and diffusion of knowledge and understanding.
This is Only in America. I'm Ali Noorani. I wanted to start with a recommendation. Okay, it's a recommendation you should act on after you listen to the podcast, but still, a recommendation. Head over to www.theatlantic.com, in essence, the website for The Atlantic magazine, and track down their new short documentary titled The Separated. It tells a powerful story of Anita and her 5-year-old son, Henry, who were separated in June at the southern border. Anita had been threatened at gunpoint by a gang in Honduras and had fled her home and her country to seek asylum in the U.S. The heroine of the story is pro bono lawyer Jody Goodwin, who realized the only record of the separation was a photograph taken by ICE, or Immigration and Customs Enforcement, of a mother and son. There were no names on the photograph.
This is how the government kept track of people. Isn't that amazing? I mean, it's a picture of the mom with her son on her lap. And it says her name and the son's name, and it says mother, son. That's how they kept track of people.
Jody told The Atlantic what happened after she won the asylum case and reunited Anita with Henry a month later.
When we were brought into the room where Henry was waiting for us, he didn't run to his mom. There wasn't this happily ever after ending. She knelt down on the floor in front of the chair where her little boy was sitting, and she asked for forgiveness. Perdóname, perdóname, perdóname. It was awful.
Her traumatized boy, who had turned 6 in captivity, told her, quote, "You're not my mom anymore." Yes, it's a happy ending, but it's an ending with lasting scars. As these scenes continue to play out and the reunification of parents and children drags on, the president addressed the country's police chiefs. He criticized the cities whose local officials refused to cooperate with ICE, continuing to label thousands of immigrants as, quote, criminal aliens.
Every day, these sanctuary city policies force the release of criminal aliens and gang members right back onto our streets, putting innocent civilians at grave risk. Many people being killed. I will fight every day for your right to cooperate with federal law enforcement and to protect your communities as you wish. And I know most of you in this room, I think probably everybody in this room, works brilliantly with our federal authorities. And it's our honor to do it, including funding, by the way, including funding. Thank you.
Well, I was at the same conference this last weekend, meeting with law enforcement across the country. As you're going to hear in future episodes, the police chiefs of Maricopa, Arizona, and Palestine, Texas, both small towns or cities, they see their immigrant communities as friends and neighbors, not as aliens. And finally, today, since sports tells us so much about our identity, there's an interesting tale in the Minnesota Post about how immigration is changing sports in high schools across the state. As more district populations change, teams are also looking different, and, well, soccer is becoming more popular. At the high school in Worthington, Minnesota, the coach there, Juan Flores, told the paper the town has transformed from one that had never heard of soccer to one where it's becoming a culture. Now, the record of the boys' soccer team so far, 13-0 with 2 draws. It's not too shabby for a town that has no history of soccer. I'm Ali Noorani. That's it for this edition of Only in America, which comes from the staff of the National Immigration Forum. The producers are Regina Medina and Emily Chow, and the executive producer is Kathleen Farrell. I'm Ali Noorani. See you next week.